How's it going, guys? Aaron here from Integratio, and today we're going to be taking a look at Wavesfactory Quantum. Quantum is a transient shaper and designer, one that gives you total control over your transients. It does this by giving you two separate channels, one for attack and one for sustain. Each of these channels can be processed and edited without affecting the other. This allows you to create some incredibly unique sounds. Now, before we get into it, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you'll be the first to see our videos when we upload new reviews. Alright, let's see how Quantum works.
Alright, so this is Quantum. You can see it split into two separate sides, your attack here in red, and your sustain here in blue. They each have solo knobs, which allows you to hear them with or without the other side and how the effects are processing. The volume dials act like an envelope shaper, and you can control them even more with your sensitivity knob, your mode selection knob, which allows you to choose from 3 different settings. You have your decay knob, which is the time in between your attack and your sustain. Next to that, on the right, you'll see your hold knob, which is going to allow you to smooth out your transient detecting. You're also able to see your beat shown from 1 to 16 times here in the viewfinder. I like to keep mine at about 4. It allows for quite a few transients to come through, but not so many that it's chaotic. Quantum also comes with a nice array of presets to get you started in the right direction. Let's load up a drum beat and see how the presets affect it. That was only a small taste of the presets that Quantum provides. All in all, there are 48 to choose from. You'll be able to dial in the specific amount you want in your mix here with the input and the output knobs accordingly. Now, let's take another listen to that drum beat, but this time instead of presets, we'll use the volume knobs and the other settings to see how it alters the sound. Notice how you can see the active changes in the red lines in the viewfinder. However, the blue lines, which are the sustain, are left completely unaltered. This is because, when in solo mode, your changes will only affect that side. You can see now that I have the sustain soloed, it only affects the blue line. Another great thing I found about Quantum is that it uses very little CPU power. You can monitor this in FL Studios right up here with their CPU monitor, and you can see just with the plugin opened, there's very little going on. Now let's see how it handles the effects in real time. You'll notice there is a big difference in the amount of CPU power used, depending on the amount of effects you use. But even at its peak, along with the other components running in our workstation, Quantum works amazingly well. Now let's take a look at how to transform sounds from scratch. I have a snare sample loaded. Let's hear how it sounds before adding Quantum. And after. You can hear how it's changed the tone of the snare completely. The original is dry and harsh, and with Quantum applied, we get a snare that has a nice, warm, thick tone, while still keeping our high-end snap. Here's how Quantum lets us achieve this. First, we'll solo out the attack so we can hear what's happening with our initial transient strike. If you look down in the bottom viewport, you can see that I've added some effects. First in the chain is an EQ with a low end cut. We cut the low end just so our snap and our high end will shine through, and we took some of the mids out just for clarity and to clean up some of the muddiness. I also added a couple of small boosts in the high end just so we can bring out the initial snap and high end resonance. The enhancer will take the high end and drive it even further, which gives it a very prominent presence in the mix. Now let's solo out the sustain. I also added an EQ on this side with the same low cut to ensure that the end result of our sustain is not too overbearing or aggressive. The reason we're doing this is because if you look at the attack, the volume is still set to the original 0, but our sustain is pushing 8.1. By controlling the low end, we won't have any issues with our next step, which is going to be taking the entire pitch of the snare down by 2 semitones. By doing this, we don't change the original tuning of the attack at all, but it does allow us to get a nice, warm, thick sustain and gives a good body to the snare. Last, I added a convolution reverb with the concert setting. This gives it some life and adds a good room sound to the overall tone of our snare. And I took it down in the mix quite a bit so it just peeks through and doesn't overtake the whole tone. Let's compare again. Without Quantum, with Quantum. The same process we just used for the snare sample can also be used to get some unique and amazing sounds out of all sorts of other samples and instruments. I'm going to open a second Quantum, which is also on our master channel, and we'll see how this track, Dusty Trails, which is a raw acoustic track recorded straight to the board and into the workstation, sounds before and after applying Quantum. Here's before. You can hear how it has a very dry and aggressive tone, as well as some low-end muddiness that really rumbles and cuts through. Overall, it isn't bad, but it isn't great either. Now let's listen to it with Quantum. After applying Quantum, the high end has a lot more clarity without being overbearing. The low end is nice and smooth, and overall, the guitar has a lot more life and shimmer. I achieved this by first adding an EQ to the attack with a low cut. This helps to smooth out the low end. I also added a cut around the 3K range to take away some of the string aggressiveness. The chain also has a convolution reverb with the Dark Hall preset, and it's sitting at 50% in the mix. Let's solo the attack and see how it sounds. Here's the raw file for reference. We're able to drastically change the sound of the initial chord strike. Now, let's solo out our sustain and see how it sounds. So in this chain, I start off with an EQ, much like on our snare sample, because I don't want any of that low-end muddiness shining through. You can see I actually raised the 3K range here to get back a little bit of that high end on the sustain output. Next in line is another pitch shifter. Only this time, we're going to take the semitones up by 12, which is an octave of the guitar that we already have. This adds a shimmering effect to the sustain part of our transient without affecting our initial attack and chord strike. It's taken down in the mix just enough to blend in, but still complement our tone. Last, but definitely not least, I've taken quite a bit of feedback out. We have a slight delay, as well as the mix input, to make sure that the effect is subtle and it blends in nicely. As you can see, being able to process effects on both sides independently gives you total control and versatility. While also cutting the volume of the sustain just a bit. This allows for virtually endless possibilities within your mix. So again, we can leave the attack volume at 0 so we don't change the initial strike. So they spike a bit lower in the attack. Let's take one last listen to what Quantum has to offer and what it can do for your sounds. Let us know what you think about Wavesfactory Quantum in the comments. And I'll see you